Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about Discworld. Yes, I'm still trying to catch up with the Great Discworld read-along, and I'm probably going to make it. Our next book will be Masquerade this coming Sunday, the, I guess, 20th, if I, survive. Which is the other big thing, obviously. So join us for the read-along with, on the Discord server of the Unabridged Burners. I'll link it down below. We're always looking for more enthusiasts, and Masquerade is another, fun one to join in. It's not, it's got witches in it and the Phantom of the Opera and stuff. So maybe it's the one you want to look at. Maybe. Yes, we'll do. Wheel of Time this week. I'll start reading Winter's Heart. My videos will be up like tomorrow and so forth, because I'll be traveling again. On Thursday, I'll fly over to Athens for the Metal from Hellas festival. If you're there, say hi. Let's have us a beer or something. And I'll fly back on Sunday early morning, so I'll try to get as much recorded before that as possible, but we'll see how all of that works, because, I just came back from Bohemia, and there's a lot of work lying around here, because, stress and shit, right? Anyway, I'm not here to complain today, I'm here to talk Discworld. So, let's talk about Soul Music, one of my favorite Discworld novels of all time. So let's do this, shall we? Ooh, cheers. Alright, so, we'll do the usual bits, which is the synopsis kind of thing, and, I'll just once again say it's one of my favorites, not only because of the topic, but also because of that. Alright, let's start. Soul Music. Book 16, we feature Death and his granddaughter Susan. We have us a bit of like wizards from Unseen University, Ridcully, the Dean, and so forth, whom we have met previously in some of the last novels, moving pictures, definitely Lords and Ladies, and so forth. And we have, well, a lot of other recurring characters, but those are like the side parts of like the story that is going down. We also have a band, the band with rocks in, because this one is about rock and roll coming to Discworld. So there is a parallel to moving pictures, I guess. And it's probably one of the reasons why I like it. So over time, we deal with the music business, all the aspects of like rock and roll coming to, a new conservative kind of place, all of that stuff, and we also deal with the question of memory and also of grief, because there's a darker side to this book, and this one I also really appreciate. So, if you're into music jokes, this one's definitely for you. If you're into Death as a character, this one's definitely for you. If you want to, just read all of Discworld, it's also yours. It's, as I said, one of the more complex ones, story-wise. We'll, talk about that in a second. And it's one of the best executed ones of the middle Discworld period. It's definitely a five-turtle read if you want to look at it that way. You should definitely go and do that. It's a lot of fun. Alright, now that you're done with that, let's talk about the book in more detail. So, what's there to talk about? Obviously, let's look at like the structure first, and then some of the themes. Now, the structure, I've said, is a fairly complex one. And I would say, while it has a lot of parallels with moving pictures, that being a art form, or whatever you want to call it, a cultural aspect of our world invades Discworld, and Discworld people have to deal with it, which then gives Terry Pratchett the chance to make a lot of like pop culture jokes about all kinds of, music in this case, or movies back in moving pictures. It also bears a lot of resemblances with Reaper Man, that obviously being the structure of, Death himself being out of office for reasons, something else happening at the same time. And it further examines the character of Death, who is definitely one of my favorite characters in Discworld, and a lot of other people's also favorite Discworld characters. And while there are certainly aspects of Reaper Man that you can find here, I feel this one is better executed in a lot of ways, because we have I would say a 3-story structure here. We have the story of the band with rocks in, becoming rock stars and dealing with the terrible aspects of the music business being taken advantage of by just about everyone, and, you know, artists being always exploited by the music industry and so forth. Which, yeah, it's true. We have the storyline of Death going missing because of, you know, dealing with the problems of his job, which is being there for everyone, no matter who dies, and having, you know, to deal with the question of justice and so forth. And he's like, I can't forget. He's trying to find out how to forget. There's interesting aspects to that in the story as well. Then we have a third kind of story, and that is the story of Susan, his granddaughter, now 16 years old, I guess, who is sucked in and has to take over Death's job. So there's also like a parallel to Mort, but I feel the Reaper Man parallel is a bit more pertinent here, because, you know, we'll see that in a second. And we have her arc of trying to find out what's going on with Death, and not really wanting to take his job, but also being sort of forced to or sucked into following around the band with rocks around, because something goes wrong there, which is, you know, Buddy or Imp Equaline, the bard, the main guy of the band's life being taken over by this, like, alien force of music. Yeah. And so her story kind of connects the other two, which is Death going out to try to to forget in several stages, and then, on the other hand, the band with rocks in plotline, which is being exploited by Cut Me Out Throat Dibbler, always a wonderful character in his own right. So I feel that's why I think it's a better story than Reaper Man, where Reaper Man had like 2 parallel stories, one of them being, you know, the Wendell Poon storyline about consumerism taking over Discworld, and on the other hand, Death coming to terms with mortality. They felt a bit more disjointed, disconnected in a way. By adding this third plotline, the Susan plotline, Terry Pratchett manages to connect those 2 stories in a more meaningful way, in a way that actually works extremely well. So, as Discworld novels go, this is a fairly complex one with those 3 storylines set up the way they are, and I guess that's one of the reasons why I think this is one of the best executed Discworld novels in what we can call the middle Discworld period. It picks up all of the strengths of older Discworld novels, which is a ton of just silly humor, pop culture references, and so forth that we see in moving pictures and in a lot of other, like, older ones. It does so in a fantastic way. The Blues Brothers references on their own are just pure gold here, and it's fantastic. And there's way more of that sort going down. But it also takes on aspects of, you know, a more political, social, and philosophical nature, which crop up in later Discworld novels. More of the questions of the human condition, memory, grief, and so forth, but also politics and economics, which have slowly crept into Discworld. I mean, they've sort of always been there, but have come a bit more to the front with books like Men-at-Arms and the likes that we saw recently. Small Gods definitely being another one of those. And in a way, this one almost feels a bit like a best of all of those aspects that make Discworld great so far, being put into one book that has a lot of those, right? Where Small Gods is a more angry or more on the nose angry book about very specific aspects of the human condition, that being mostly, faith and religion and so forth. This one is still makes points about how we should live our lives, but it also very much does not pull any punches when it's making jokes. And that's one of the reasons why I really like and why I think it's one of the best executed Discworld novels in the middle period. It's not my overall favorite Discworld novel, though. That is Nightwatch. All right. Now let's look at the themes. And yes, I do love this one because of the rock and roll aspect of it. The rock band, becoming a rock band, and all these things. Because Terry Pratchett gets it right. I mean, look, heavy metal and music in general is a huge part of my life. It's arguably the most important part of my life, but it's a huge thing, and it's always difficult, and this is where one of the strengths of Terry Pratchett's writing in general lies, to actually transfer the meaning of one art form to a different one. It's like to express in words what music does to people who really enjoy music is not exactly easy, because one's music is auditory, and at the same time literature is written language. One is with words, the other one is not exactly with words, and so forth. It's difficult, and Terry Pratchett manages to do so in a lot of interesting ways that I think is all worth pointing out here. There is the just imaginative prose that he pulls from time to time. There's a quote, it's the guitar screamed like an angel who had just found out why it was on the wrong side. And that is just a wonderful sentence to describe how, certain electric guitars sound. It's just, it finds the right words, the right image to project, and that is obviously a lot of fun. It also manages to, point it out in all kinds of other more fun ways. The way, the effect that specific art, parts of rock, mostly rock and roll music or underground music in general later on has, right? The effect that it kind of connects to a more irrational, to a more I don't want to use the word animal or animalistic side, but to a less rational, controlled side. That holds up that dream, and that's something that kind of ties it back again to moving pictures. But it holds up that dream in a different way, which is that loss of control, that idea that everything is possible, and so forth. And that's something that other aspects, the way that everyone starts building, forming their own bands and trying to get the sound right and all of that is also included in here. So Terry Pratchett gets that bit of the effect of music. He gets that right, and it's hard to do that, right? I've been writing music reviews for a decade by now, and I'm still struggling with kind of putting into words what I feel when I listen to a specific album. Sometimes it just really works well, sometimes it just really is super tough. And Terry Pratchett manages to do so extremely well in this book, and I'm very happy for this to exist in that way. So yeah, that's one of the things that he gets really right. The other aspect is the obviously the more industry side of things, the fact how musicians and artists in general are always the last in our capitalist system to actually profit from their art. And there's a bunch of aspects in there, casual jokes like how most musicians are incapable of actually also being businessmen, and there's something to be said about that. Apart from the jokes that all musicians are bad at actual finances, not all of them are, but it's certainly there's reasons why that is the case, I guess. And one of them is that if you're a full-time artist, no one should expect you to also be a full-time businessman and a full-time promoter and all these other things. That's not how this should work, and that's something I'll probably come back to in a different video again. But the question is why do then, companies exploit artists the way they do. And the question there is there a fundamental like disrespect or lack of respect towards art? And this goes obviously for all forms of art, not only music, but this is like the type of art Terry Pratchett chooses to examine these kind of things. It very much goes for graphic design and visual arts these days, right? All of those people are underpaid for a lot of reasons. And one of those reasons is that most people don't actually value art as high as we claim we do. Having those bits in there is done in a more humorous way. There's a lot of the humor that comes from these kind of things. Having Glod, the dwarf, always negotiate and get nothing out of negotiating because it's really bad at negotiating is one of those aspects. There's, all kinds of these things. But there's a saying there that I think is important when they're talking about fame and money. Is like what every true artist wants at the bottom of their heart is to get paid. And yeah, that's true. Artists want to get paid, and they deserve to get paid, and that Pratchett picks up on the dilemma of the idea that art or music should be free, and art and music should also, support the people that create it. Yeah, just well done, really. I did enjoy that bit. Plus, it's also always fun to, it's always fun to see CMOT Dibbler do Dibbler things, which, is pretty cool. So what else is there? The effect of music on people, and that's sort of where the wizard bit kind of comes in, and it's absolutely fantastic how Terry Pratchett moves on in like developing the cast of Unseen University's faculty with the bursar being struggling with the mental health situations. We might want to talk about that in a later book, whether that is, appropriate or not, the way Terry Pratchett deals with that. But we have Ridcully, who's like fundamentally trying to, not thinking about these kind of things. We have the Dean, who's always the most receptive one when it comes to these new things. And these are bits and pieces that showed up before, right? We have the Dean being one of the first ones who goes fully into like the moving pictures kind of thing during, moving pictures. We then have him go like full out Rambo in Reaper Man. I always want to say Reaper's Gale when I talk about that book. But anyway, see him there, right? And now it becomes even more of a thing in this book, with the Dean leading these things on and making just like all these decisions that we associate with rebellious kids, recognizing music. For realizing music as part of like the way to rebel against our parents. And it's well done because it's even more humorous in a lot of ways. And part of the humor is the fact that all of these are old wizards with like 70 years old and whatnot, right? And to see have these things in there, I guess, is just like, it's a lot of fun to talk about it. There's like really cool pop culture jokes in there about painting your bedroom black and putting up posters and all of these things. But that situation when Arch Chancellor when the Dean is like, the problem with you, Arch Chancellor, is that you don't understand people of our age, and he's like 7 months older than me. It rams home and makes these like teenage rebellion bits that we all went through, right, as most of us went through as humans. It makes it easy to laugh at them when you point out the absurdity by having them performed basically, and it is a lot of it is performance, obviously, always was, always will. To see them done by 70-year-old wizards with long white beards, and that part is just like goes into like the more surrealist, absurdist humor that you get with like your Monty Python movies and whatnot. And Pratchett is really good at that in this one, and I really enjoy those bits. Plus, the librarian has a lot of stuff going down in this book, and I'm always a fan of the librarian. From him being like the fifth Beatle who left before the band got famous, to building the motorcycle that Death rides out on. All of these things are just fantastic, and a lot of fun. All right. Let's talk about the darker bits and pieces, right? I think that's also important here. There's a lot of darker sides here, mostly in the death storyline, even though the death storyline itself has a lot of humor. But the overall theme that we're talking about here, and that is death, well, obviously he is the function death, but he's also developed a personality. I've examined that in a separate video at some point, but what you see is the setup here of Death having to face the fact that he had to be there when his adopted daughter, Isabel, and his former apprentice, Mort, died, and having no actual choice over whether they would die or not, but having to still be there and take their lives, so to speak, or take their souls. What that does with a person, and how having to be impartial and just be there, what that effect has on, well, grief, guilt, and memory is, I guess, a really important aspect, because it's one that, in theory, a lot of us face when we have to perform specific jobs, even though we, maybe don't agree with all the things, because most of us have to do specific jobs to survive and have no real choice. So dealing with that pressure is really interesting, and looking at coping mechanisms for that, which, in this case, are drinking a lot or joining the Clatchian Foreign Legion. Well, technically also other aspects like finding that magical river that makes you forget, but we look at the more socially accepted versions of either finding a finding a distraction from all our other problems by switching careers, basically, or self-medicating at the end of the day. And it leads to a lot of fun. That the Clatchian Foreign Legion bit is one of those where Terry Pratchett manages to slip in general commentary on a lot of things on the side, which I think is just one of his strengths, where it's a side about the fact that map makers decided where one country ends and another one begins, which leads to a lot of new wars and stuff, because someone who has no idea of the actual situation makes an arbitrary decision that has no impact on the people on the ground, apart from creating more problems. Could you read this as a commentary on, well, mostly the effects of colonialism and the age that followed the end of colonialism in, well, at least military colonialism in, say, Africa? Yeah, of course you could, and you probably should. It's important to have these bits and pieces in there, because it shows that Terry Pratchett's world is never just about one theme. He'll usually, if he gets the chance to make a point about something else that just feels appropriate at that point, will be done. Case in point, casual racism. When Glod tries to find the librarian and figures out how to do that without being, belittled or whatnot for not being human, but being a dwarf. Well done. Because this book, while still being aware of these aspects, is not very much about racism, unlike other books. And I think it's important to see that, because it shows that Discworld is a whole breathing universe where problems don't just go away between books because now the book is about something else. They still stay there, and there will be small reminders here and there and again that, once again, will just show up. What else is there that is interesting to look at? Small bits like examinations of pop culture and whatnot. There's a dig in that I think is worth talking about, which may be part of Terry Pratchett's personal dissatisfaction with how fantasy literature is, seen in the wider public, which is when they're talking about mythology. It's just that mythology is just made-up stories with very little literary content, and thus not fit to be talked about in academia. If you're saying, well, Salman Rushdie, maybe you should have read Terry Pratchett before writing your absolutely horrific essay last year, well, you're right. Or maybe he should have reread. I assume Salman Rushdie may have read a Terry Pratchett novel in his life. I give him that much respect. point is, it's these small bits and pieces that show up there, or, the description of a battle that is not really necessary because it's just like a border conflict that has been going on for centuries. It's like the point was that people are dying and incredibly stupid acts of heroism were performed. Yeah, that's a way to describe war. That's a way to describe the way we look at war, which is the incredibly stupid acts of heroism side of things. And, the general meaninglessness of a lot of wars and a lot of fighting and whatnot. It's those small bits that are, painted in. The casual greed, displayed in the first, job that Susan has to do is another one of those. Those aspects are there because this is a living and breathing world. And something I really like. The other interesting thing, I guess, we need to talk about here is definitely Susan's storyline. Because what Terry Pratchett does here, and this is, once again, in my opinion, well done, is to use the fact, the ways and the possibilities of fantasy to make statements about growing up, about adolescence, right? It's like that feeling of being different, being special, or, just not like anyone else that most of us, I guess, have experienced while growing up. Some of us maybe are still experiencing. And the question of whether they are real or not and how to deal with those can just be, shown in a more distant way, well, not less powerful way, by just making the person that experiences them actually special, right? In this case, being the granddaughter of death and suddenly having these special powers and coming to terms with those, whether those are, just being an adult, having all these responsibilities that adults tend to have forced upon us, right? Having that in there, dealing with bullying because you may be a bit different or just not part of whatever is going on at the point. Pratchett manages to do that in a way that still doesn't make this a you're the special one and you are right kind of way, because Susan's behavior towards other people is extremely arrogant in a lot of ways and doesn't recognize a lot of these things. And Pratchett is aware of that and shows that, right? There's that conversation with that she has with Death, and I think that's a very important one, which is when Death talks to her about most people being mean and stupid, and you wish when you look down at the world and you see all these lit windows, you wish for it to be, there being really interesting stories behind each and every one of those, and every life being meaningful, and at the bottom of your heart knowing that that's not true. And then Susan does the reasonable thing here, and the good thing, the human thing is no, it means being human. And that's where we are, right? This is the important bit. A lot of us, I suspect, have felt some form of derision for other people, especially when we're going through that adolescent rebellious phase where you're all dead from, he calls it dead from the neck up, where it's people having no heart, living humdrum lives and so forth. And while that feeling is, very easy to have when you're growing up, there's also, the point when you realize that sometimes that's just how the world makes you over time. It's not everyone else's fault. And at the end of the day, every human life is always has value just by being a human life. There's no such thing as a dull human life for the individual. That's sort of the point behind that. And Terry Pratchett manages to pack all these things into a story that at the end of the day is just still a lot of fun to talk about because of band jokes. There's so many band jokes in there that are for making fun of, drummers and the likes, to, as I said, a lot of Blues Brothers jokes that are just over the top funny, to, something that I want to look at here as well, which is more social political commentary, right? When Death ends up with the the beggars, which are as invisible as him, as it is said. It's like no one, notices them because they are so outside of, society, I guess, at the end of the day. And it's important to look at that as well because it shows the other side of being different. There is always that point of like being completely different than the rest of the world, but that will put you on the outside. And that's a price that is very, very high to pay indeed. And we see all of those options, right? It's like with the Klatchin Foreign Legion, the so-called holy man that he visits, those people are outside of society completely. And it's clear that that is not a choice most of us want to make or should make. And to have that aspect in there as well, I felt was like, apart from like having like really solid commentary on how we as a society deal with our castaways, our outcasts, our like invisible people, homeless people, and so forth, which he manages to do like very poignantly in a way that I think is one of the strengths of Terry Pratchett, to switch from hilarious slapstick humor and the like all the way to a very empathetic kind of way to talk about like real humans and their tragedies. That's something he does extremely well here. And then yes, there's once again, I want to end it with this, like what Terry Pratchett does so well, which is put into words jokes or references to a different medium, right? We had the description in Moving Pictures at the end from, where he basically subverts and makes fun of, and mostly references the ending of King Kong. Just the other way around, with the giant human climbing up on the tower holding the ape prison. This time around, we have a more direct homage when he talks about how Death takes the motorcycle and rides out of the ground on the motorcycle, having a rose in his teeth. And yeah, you should look up that picture. Because what Pratchett does so well here is he transforms a visual image into words that you will recognize if you have seen the picture. And it's this way of casually doing it that is so fantastic in Pratchett's very specific way of prose, and the freedoms that he has given himself in this in Discworld. All right, what else is there? Well, the power of music, obviously, and this is, I guess, what lies at the heart of it, and what makes me love this book so much, is that throughout this book you can feel Terry Pratchett's personal love and respect for the power of music, which at the end of the day it's also the power of art in general, to move human hearts and souls, to give us life and all these things. And he does that so wonderfully with the ballad that Buddy plays, right? The sad song that is about whole. It's about sadness and waving that sadness like a banner, that you're still there and you're not giving up. It's like if you ever heard doom metal, you'll probably understand what he means there. And having like art and music in its freedom and its continuous, rebellion against the rules, as something that created the universe, that is in there, lies at the heart of human nature, which is to be our own person, to do our own thing, to always try to rebel at least a bit. And even though society sometimes drags us into situations where we can't do that, it's still there, that drive somewhere deep down. And that's what lies at the heart of this. That the fact that we should never, and we probably can never, fully give up the dream of rebellion, the dream of individuality, I guess, at the end of it. And that music can be one of the ways to express that. That is, and I think that's a very positive, that's a very hopeful message, at least for someone like me, for whom, music is just a very, very important point in my life as well. So, yeah, it's one of my favorite books because of all of these reasons, because it gets the music right. It gets the music right while still making a lot of fun about it, a lot of jokes about it. And it gets the human right. It gets the human right again. So yeah, one of my favorite Discworld novels, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well. If you like soul music, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. If you disliked it, let me know why you disliked it. Let's have us a bit of a discussion about it. Maybe leave a like for the video. Share it if you feel like it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I would really appreciate all of that. And maybe if you want, join us on that read-along, maybe for Masquerade next Sunday if I survive my flight back from Athens. So yeah, have a great day. See ya. Cheers.